the biggest problem that Hollywood has had in trying to make a Reagan movie over the years was his fans are very, very devoted to him. And the moment they get a whiff that you're out to destroy him or that you have an agenda against him, they will pummel you. People sense that we didn't have an agenda against him. I had an exchange with Mrs. Reagan early on where I just told her what we were doing, and that was it. And she didn't ask for script approval or anything like that. The only thing she asked for was, could you please let me know before you make a big announcement? So before we announced casting or whatever, I would send up a note to her and say, we're doing this. But I did want the viewer to just feel like this is an honest portrayal, not carrying water for anybody, good or bad, against him or for him.
Have you seen the film Reagan? I just watched it. It's really interesting, fascinating historical perspective, an interesting portrayal of the man, a lot I didn't know about in his early life. I love American history. I love the film. And now there is a book called Making Reagan by the producer, Mark Joseph, and he joins us next. Before we throw you to that interview, please let me remind you to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We've got so many great guests coming up, and the library is full of tremendous guests and interviews and all kinds of stuff. So check us out. Hit that subscribe button right there on YouTube, Rumble, wherever you are, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Doesn't matter. Hit subscribe. We really appreciate it. Mark Joseph, the producer of Reagan and the author of the film Making Reagan, is next. Mark, welcome. It's great to meet you. And you've accomplished a lot in the past few years under a lot of tough circumstances. We know about the writers' strike. We know about COVID. First of all, just how did this project, Reagan, come to you?
Yeah, well, I like to think it came to me because as I begin the book with this crazy story that it's so crazy it has to be true. I'm driving in the Midwest to my cousin's wedding, and I have my wife and four little girls under the age of 6 or something, maybe 7. And
Wow.
I'm just driving.
That's quite a scene, by the way, but go ahead.
I'm driving along in a minivan, minding my own business, and I'm pulled over for speeding. The speed demon in a minivan with 4 children. And it was, I'd been traveling like 65 and all of a sudden it was 45. And so, of course, I missed that. So I'm suddenly 20 miles over the speed limit. Serious crime, right? So I'm pulled over by this young cop, and I noticed that his hand was shaking a little bit, like he was first day on the job or something. And he's writing me this ticket. And he says, you have to appear in court in person a month from now. And, not to be a wiseacre Hollywood guy, but, I don't think I can fly back to Illinois a month from now for a ticket. I'm just trying to process this information. Well, he says, well, maybe you can do it tomorrow. Maybe you can get you in tomorrow. And so I'm just flabbergasted by all this. I look at the ticket, and it says you must appear in court in Dixon, Illinois. Well, I know enough to know that's Ronald Reagan's hometown. And so I'm stuck in Dixon, Illinois, for the night, and I have to stay in the Holiday Inn and face the judge the next day. So that's where this all started.
So you knew enough to know. See, I wouldn't have known that Dixon, Illinois, except for having watched your film, that in that circumstance, I wouldn't have thought, hey, this is Ronald Reagan's hometown. I think I'll stay a while. So that's where you start. But then what happens next? I mean, that's being in Reagan's hometown, but that led to a film and now a book. I love to talk about my friends at besthotgrill.com. Grilling season is upon us. I couldn't be happier. And I have a Solaire infrared grill, and I love this thing. And I know it's the last grill I'm ever going to buy. So these are really hot, fast grills. So they heat up in 3 minutes. It doesn't matter if it's 30 below outside. So year-round grilling is a thing with this Solaire infrared grill. Now, you might already have a low temperature, slow cooking smoker, an egg or pellet barbecue. They're fine when you have time, but you don't have to wait for the weekend. With a Solaire infrared gas grill, it heats up to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes, like I said, even in the dead of winter. And what that high heat does is it locks in the juices. It grills food faster, and it makes steaks, chicken, veggie, fish, whatever you want. It makes them all tastier because they're more succulent. In a matter of minutes, you can have a healthy dinner for the whole family, something that everyone likes. And with Solaire's demo rental program, you can try before you buy. You get it at home, you try it out, no one's breathing down your neck, and you'll understand why this USA made grill will be the last grill you ever buy. Learn more at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com. Try before you buy with the Solaire demo rental program at besthotgrill.com. What happens next? I mean, that's being in Reagan's hometown, but that led to a film and now a book.
Well, what it did was it just, I was in film at the time. I was working for a company called Walden Media. We had done the Chronicles of Narnia and Ray Charles and Holes and all these great movies. And so I was working in film, but what it did was it just really focused my attention for that 24-hour period on the fact that the great people in our country, our heroes, our leaders, they come from really ordinary places. If you travel around the world, the presidents and prime ministers are often the children or grandchildren of previous presidents and prime ministers, sort of like the Bushes. That happens a lot, or the Roosevelts. But most of our presidents and our leaders come from really ordinary places, ordinary families, and it's really bipartisan, right? Think about it. Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, name them all, and they're just normal people from normal families, often sometimes without a dad. Like Reagan's dad was often absent, Obama's dad was gone, Clinton's dad was gone. So it really just drove home that point that there's a great story here to be told. And Dixon just helped me focus to really comprehend that, and then also see where he was a lifeguard and all that stuff. So I have to thank that officer for the $500 ticket he gave me.
Wow. Did you end up winning in court, or did you have to pay it?
Okay, so since you asked, Michelle, so because I'm kind of a smart aleck, I told my wife, like, I want you to now videotape me. At that time, we had barely had cell phones, of going the speed limit. So I started going the speed limit in that same area, and people were flipping me off and F you and speed up. And so now I think I've got the judge, right? So the next day I have my little tape prepared, and the lawyer type person they appoint to give you warned me. He said, look, if you don't plead guilty, he can throw you in jail. So, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm a dad of 4 little girls getting hauled off to jail the next day. This would be horrible, right? So I know I have my limits. Anyway, I told the judge, Your Honor, may I please show you the tape of what happens when I go the speed limit? And he just looks at me in that good old boy thing, and he said, son, I'm not going to watch your video, guilty or innocent. So it's my moment of truth. I plead guilty. I go to pay the fine, and the lady at the counter, I said, how many people today? She said, you're the 19th one. And I'm thinking 19 people at $500 a shot, that's a pretty good operation they have going.
Yeah, it is good for a little Dixon, Illinois.
But listen, hats off to Dixon. Thank you for the gift you gave me, and it became a movie.
But the gift wasn't easy. You had a lot of obstacles. What was the biggest hurdle that you had to clear?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest problem that Hollywood has had in trying to make a Reagan movie over the years was his fans are very, very devoted to him. And the moment they get a whiff that you're out to destroy him or that you have an agenda against him, they will pummel you.
But didn't Will Ferrell have a movie planned that was going to show Reagan at his worst?
Yeah, it's happened a couple of times. The first was James Brolin did a series called The Reagans, where Reagan was kind of, a little bit of a doofus. And the fans shut that one down. It was going to be on CBS. It got moved to Showtime. Nobody ended up seeing it. And then Will Ferrell, as you said, announced this with great fanfare. He's doing this Reagan movie where Reagan's going to be, I guess, sort of out of it. And the only way they could convince him that to be a president is that to tell him that he's playing a president in a movie. Ha ha ha! Let's make fun of Alzheimer's. But I can tell you the reason that I know this is that people thought it was our movie. So they came to our Facebook page. And I remember one person, this is how devoted they are. One person wrote, Will Ferrell is on the wall of fame at his high school in Orange County. Here's the phone number. Call his high school and demand he be taken off the wall of fame of his high school. Like, these are serious fans, right?
Yeah.
So that one shut down. And 2 days later, Will Ferrell's like, what Reagan movie? I might have heard about something.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. Totally disowned it. But so that was always an issue. And I think that the only reaction from my friends in Hollywood was just like, let's just give up. Let's not even try. It's not worth it. But I think that early on, people sensed that we didn't have an agenda against him. Now, on the flip side, we did not have official approval from the family or the Reagan Library. I wanted the film goer to know that we had an honest portrayal, that we weren't indebted to anybody. I had an exchange with Mrs. Reagan early on where I just told her what we were doing, and that was it. And she didn't ask for script approval or anything like that. The only thing she asked for was, could you please let me know before you make a big announcement? So before we announced casting or whatever, I would send up a note to her and say, we're doing this. But I did want the viewer to just feel like this is an honest portrayal, not carrying water for anybody, good or bad, against him or for him.
Right. I truly got that sense in watching it, that it was honest. Casting it must have been fascinating. And I wonder how that process evolved. When you start looking for a guy to play Ronald Reagan, one of the most beloved presidents in American history, even though there's certainly a faction that does not care for him. Where do you start?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When I tell my friends, and when I wrote this book, if you have a person in your life who wants to be in film, give them this book, and you'll talk them out of it, and they'll want to become a dentist or a doctor or something.
They'll never want to go through this process.
Right, anything but this. But yeah, casting is a huge part of the process. I would kind of collect. I don't know if word collect is right, but over the years, I would be thinking about people for certain roles. And so, we had a casting director that came on later, but early on, just to give you an example, I met John Voight. We were at a dinner together, and we were waiting for our cars. And I thought, John, he would be a great role for something. I don't know what, but I kind of kept that in the back of my mind, and we exchanged cards and things. And so that was kind of a process. Robert Davi, who played Brezhnev, I just always saw him as Brezhnev. So I would tell Robert, hey, I want you to play Brezhnev. The actress who played Reagan's mother, Jennifer O'Neill, I worked with her 10 years ago. And I said, hey, Jennifer, I want you to play Reagan's mother. So I'd kind of have these little people I collected along the way. And a few people I wasn't able to land the plane on, like Richard Dreyfuss and Martin Sheen. But most of them said yes. And then, of course, our casting director came on board and had other people. But the main roles of Dennis and Penelope, those are the key ones that I really had to nail down. And Dennis was always my first choice, but there were times he wasn't available. So at one point, I was talking to Nicolas Cage about it. That would have taken a lot of hair and makeup.
Yeah.
But Dennis was kind of always our first choice. Then Penelope kind of came late in the process. She was, I went over to Dennis's house and had no idea how he would react. And I said, Dennis, what do you think about Penelope Ann Miller? And he said, Carlito's Way. And he loved it. So it's just kind of it's a matter of taking some time and thinking through, not just that they look like them, that's good too, but it's really about their persona and their acting ability. Penelope is just a fantastic actress, as you know, and Dennis, Dennis just kind of exudes Reagan's charm.
He does. He does. He was a good choice. How much of it was political though? Because you certainly have people in the film who identify more conservative in Hollywood, which is it's kind of a rare thing for people to come out as conservative in Hollywood.
Yeah, look, we have a real mix in the film. If we shot during the election of 2020, the first part of it. So it was funny because in the same time period, I would have John Voight would go off and make these Trump videos, down the street at some studio. Yeah. Unbeknownst to me, all of a sudden I look and there he is, exalting the wonders of Trump. And then I would have Mark Moses flying off to Montana to do a Democratic fundraiser for the governor candidate in Montana. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And I think maybe some of the actors were there because it was Ronald Reagan, but others were just there for the work. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking in particular of my Tip O'Neill actor, Dan. He was in The Wonder. He was the dad in the Wonder Years. Died in the wool liberal. And yet he loved the work. He loved the challenge of playing Tip O'Neill. So we did have a mix. I'd say our more conservative leaning actors like the Kevin Sorbo, who played very, very short, a little cameo playing the preacher. Who better to play a preacher than Kevin Sorbo, right?
Who better?
But Robert Davi, of course, is very outspoken. But it was really a mix, and then some people that were not political at all. So it was really a mix.
Financing a film is always challenging, I'm sure,
Yeah.
unless you're with a mainstream production company and you're about to produce Harry Potter 16 or whatever. But so how did that go given the political climate at the time?
Yeah, I just I don't think you would want to see a movie on Ronald Reagan financed by a studio. It just I could yeah I have horror stories from my past and other movies where just the corporate decision making process ends up with very weird things. And I just I'm a big fan of letting characters be the characters. Reagan's mother was very religious, so I don't want to water that down or make it half
Right.
she was. Let her be religious. His dad was a drunk. I mean, it's like the perfect combination of a religious mom, a church lady, and an alcoholic dad. And that would have been watered down for fear of offending somebody. And then the politics, look, he's a political person, so you can't not do the politics. At the same time, John Avildsen was my original director. He passed away, but at 81, but he was the director of Rocky. And John would often tell me, he would say, don't forget that Rocky is not about boxing. It just happens to be his occupation. In the
Right.
same way, this movie is not about politics per se. It's his occupation, but it's really about the man and all he has to overcome.
Yeah.
But the way that I work with studios is I make it independently and finance it, and then we bring it to a studio for partnership. That's really the only way to go with material like this. They do not know how to handle something like this.
It's fascinating. It really is. What did you expect the box office and the critics to do with this film? It comes out and I just remember thinking, I wonder how many people are going to go see this. There are tons of Reagan fans out there, so it should do fine. But I want to know what your expectations were and how they were met.
Yeah, well, first of all, the LA Times labeled it a sleeper hit, so I'll take that. The thing that surprised me was the critics. Honestly, I usually go into these types of movies. I worked on The Passion of the Christ with Mel. I produced the soundtrack. I didn't produce the film, but that one was a 49% at Rotten Tomatoes for critics. So I've always looked at that as a guide, that 49, just because of the nature of a lot of film criticism, 49 means it's really good, but it's being punished for other reasons that have nothing to do with the work itself. And so that was always my North Star. So I was shooting for 49, as I always do. This one came in at 18. I did not expect the 18% for critics. But the good news is that the people who watched the movie at Rotten Tomatoes is 98. So that
Yeah.
98 to 18, believe it or not, Michelle, we've actually applied to Guinness World Book of Records because that's the greatest gap in the history of all movies ever made for a theatrical narrative movie.
Well, how
Um,
do you explain that? Is it that the critics just can't stand a good movie about a Republican? I mean, that's my initial reaction. That's my gut feel about the critics.
well, two things. First of all, I noticed that one critic was honest, and he said, "I left after 20 minutes," and he still wrote the review. So, I mean, at that point, in school, if you did that, you'd get an F. But that happens. Another critic was tweeting on his way into the theater, negative things about it, and he hadn't even started yet. So, but what I was just out of my own curiosity, I began to dig around, and I found out. I asked, there were some religious and conservative leaning movie sites. They're not counted at Rotten Tomatoes. And so I just asked them, have you applied? And they said, oh, yeah, we were denied because of our position on LGBT issues.
Okay.
So the process is a bit rigged
Yeah.
because those sites are not allowed to join the club. But listen, I'm not complaining because moviegoers are really smart, and they see that 98-18 and they know what's going on.
They do.
And,
Yeah. I
and
think the
another
98 speaks much louder than the 18,
Right, and
frankly.
listen, to be totally honest with you, the New York Times review was kind of nice, and it made me a little nervous because, yeah, the New York Times was giving a thumbs up to a Reagan film would not be a good day.
um And so not only did you make the film, now you have this book, Making Reagan. Why did you think it was important to share the story behind the film?
Yeah, I would just have people along the way when I would share what was happening and the long process it took, and investors who appear and disappear. And people would say, this movie sounds good, but this process sounds even more interesting, and you should write something. So I had a couple of people say that, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to keep taking notes as I go along the way. So, it's a bizarre world we operate in. And in particular, there was one person who pledged $60 million to fund the entire thing. And we moved along, and then just suddenly the company went bankrupt and they're gone just like that. And another a woman who signed a contract for $5 million, and then all of a sudden disappears. And so I mean it's a bizarre situation, but just all the ups and downs. And it shouldn't have taken so long, but it did. And it was the timing was the timing. Some people thought we had engineered this movie, for the 2024 election, and I can tell you absolutely not. It was never in the plan. I would have loved to have had it out years ago. But just the way things came about, it ended up being released on August 30th of an election year, which Dennis and I were trying so hard to not be an election year. But it was just, that was the plan, I guess.
Sometimes life doesn't agree with your plans or just laughs at your calendar,
Right.
Um, what, if anything, did you learn about Reagan that may have disappointed you, surprised you, shocked you, anything?
Yeah, well, I had a chance to meet with about 50 of his aides, George Shultz, who was Secretary of State, Ed Meese, and so many others. Of course, his son Michael was a I've known Michael for years. But I asked, look, at a Superman story without Clark Kent is not that interesting. Nobody,
Mm.
what makes Superman interesting is Clark Kent and the fact that he is this. And so I was always looking for, okay, is there a dark side, or and there's no dark side with Reagan. He's not like remember those old SNL sketches where he'd be giving Girl Scout cookies, and then they'd leave and he'd pull the map down and say, we're invading here. And there's
Yes,
nothing
yeah.
like that he's just a good guy. But what I did find is that he had a lot of failure in his life and a lot of unachieved goals and dreams and things he wanted to do. And he had a small temper that was good to know as well. One of his aides, Peter Hannaford, I was like, you've got to give me something human about the guy. He can't just be Mr. Perfect all the time. Would he ever get upset? And he said, yeah, occasionally it would come and go very quickly. But I said, well, what would tick him off? And he said, well, one day, like, we overscheduled him. And he looked down at this schedule, and he said he threw his glasses across the table, and he said, I can't do all this in one day, guys. So that was good. Right now we're making some progress in
Well,
making really.
immediately, what comes to mind for me is I paid for this microphone. That famous debate moment where he
Yeah.
kind of turned on a dime and showed this
Yes.
side of himself that was
Good.
like a fighter. And
Good.
I think it really appealed to people.
Yeah, there were two times he lost his cool in public. Otherwise, he was pretty good at hiding it. But that one, and then the very last day of the campaign in '80, he's in San Diego, and some heckler starts, and Reagan turns to him and goes, shut up. And by today's Twitter standards, that could be a problem. But it's a great human moment. So you're right. Those are the two examples of just a quick flash of temper, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that was super helpful. But as I said, I think the key was really that he didn't reach his potential until he's 69 years old, basically. And it's so funny because when I read some of I don't read them all, but I noticed a few of the critics were saying that we were hagiography and making me be Mr. Perfect, and I'm like, did you guys watch the same film I watched? Because in my movie, he's dumped by his girlfriend when he's 22 years old. His wife dumps him. He's washed up at 50, sitting on a park bench with his mother, saying, "You said I was going to be somebody great, and my life is a disaster."
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of the movie. It's the comeback. It's
Yeah.
the Rocky comeback. So, as I said, maybe some of that criticism was from people who left after 20 minutes, maybe.
Well, I think the book is a must read for business students, for film, producers, wannabe screenwriters, anybody who's interested in the process, because it really is revelatory. I can't let you go without asking another obvious question about politics in Hollywood. Um, It's pretty liberal, and we all see it, we all feel it, we all know it. It's California after all. Not all films are made in Hollywood. I get it. But is there we see this Kelsey Grammer, we see the Dennis Quaid, we see the Kevin Sorbo, uh, and is there at all kind of an underground of people who just know, if I come out on this side, I'm gonna get, I won't work again. But if I'm honest, I'm kind of conservative.
Yeah, I mean, it always surprises me, and especially after Trump. Trump has attracted some uniquely unusual support. I don't think she would mind me saying it, but the actress who played Margaret Thatcher for me, Leslie Ann Down, she's pretty outspoken on Twitter, but that really shocked me. And I when I found out, like I got to the set and I was expecting, here's going to be a good British liberal woman, and she's like, "I'm a Trumper and I don't care who knows about it." And I'm like, "Really? Like, how did this happen, Leslie Ann?" And I mean, she was married to William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist. She's like Hollywood legend. And I said, like, how did you become a Trump supporter? And she said, "Well, I've been a Democrat all my life, and the first time I ever voted for a Republican was Donald Trump." So that was really, I mean, for every young evangelical Trump loses, he picks up, a Leslie Ann Down, and I can't really explain it. But to answer your question, I mean, there's a big range in Hollywood of people, center, right, left. Yeah, I think the conservatives are a little more, careful. Now, when they hit a certain age, it's so funny. When they hit a certain age, the John Voight, what do you call it? The John Voight situation, they don't care anymore. And
Yeah.
then they're bulletproof and they just, give all caution to the wind.
Yeah.
But look at the same time, I'm really encouraged because I have some very, very liberal friends. I'm thinking one in particular who runs a mini studio, and he put out Michael Moore's movie, and then he wanted to put out Dinesh D'Souza's movie, and he's an old-fashioned liberal, and
Mm.
old-fashioned liberals tolerated all points of view and encouraged all
Yeah.
points of view. And so, the Bill Maher, I think it's the Bill Maher crowd that
Yeah.
is particularly encouraging. That's what we need to get back to. And I think in our own way on this movie, as I said earlier, we really had a broad range of people, and we all worked in an election year. Everybody worked together. Nobody ratted on each other, or what. Everybody had different points of view, and yet we all had a common purpose, right? We all were working to get this movie done. And so I'm sort of hopeful in a way. I know there are always going to be challenges, but if you do good work and you find good partners, in our case, even though we made the movie by ourselves, Universal and Lionsgate came along after we were done, and they were great partners. But in the role in that.
That means they felt it was a film worth distributing and being a part of, and it is. You can learn a lot. I'm mad for history. I love American history in particular. You can learn a lot watching this film, and that's what one part of it I really enjoyed, the aspect of communism, how they viewed Reagan all along. It's a full circle thing. It's really interesting, and I think it would be eye-opening for people to understand. Congratulations on both the film and the book, Making Reagan. You can find it on Amazon and anywhere that you find your books, and you can still download the film. It's streaming on a number of places. I happened to watch it on Apple TV. So there you go. Hey, thanks so much, Mark. Congratulations on everything.
It's great to meet you, Michelle. Thank you.
Likewise. I love that Oval Office background. I need to get that. I need to get that and become the first woman to sit in the Oval Office as the commander in chief. Everyone, as I always say at the end of every podcast, be brave, do good, as he has done with this film and this book. Go check it out, and we will see you next time. Hey, you can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.